Hello everyone, what's going on? I'm Gaff, Master974 back again today, and welcome to another Source Shorts video. I don't know what to call this, but this is going to be looking at player effects, I guess. So for example, the shadows and making sure the player shows up in stuff like monitors and reflections. So for this video, I do need to give a thank you to Axtro is Good for leaving a YouTube comment talking about the monitor and reflection stuff. And I also need to give a thank you to Supercan for reaching out to me in private messages and for also leaving a comment on my Steam account. So thank you for that. And so let's just get into what you would need to do to attempt to resolve these issues. So I'm in an everything solution in the new Team Fortress 2 64-bit Source 2013 multiplayer code, though this should work for Source 2013 single player mods as well. And what you want to do is go to c_baseplayer.cpp, which is on the client. And then you want to find the should draw this player function. And if you look through it, it says that if you're not in first person, then in other words, you're in third person, then draw the player. Otherwise, if you're not in VR, but this convar is set to true, then you draw the model and so on. But at the end, it returns false. But what we want to do is make it return true instead. That way, the game is basically saying, draw the player at all times. And that's pretty much all you'd need to do, but there is a bit of a downside. If I were to, for example, compile the code and boot into a map, then I could show you the issues that you'll run into. But yeah, anyway, so what I'm going to do is load into a map that I've specifically created for this, and I'm just going to enter some gobbledygook as the password so no one ends up joining the game inadvertently. But what we should see is, because the game is set to make sure that the player actually gets drawn, then we'd actually see our own player model when we are just moving around and doing stuff. But as you can see, as per Supercan's original suggestion, as I'll show, is to add the player shadows in first person view. That gets added with this change that I showcased. And for Axtro's comment, you get the player showing up in monitor reflections like so, but not monitor in monitor reflection. Well, you know what I'm talking about. It's only the first sort of tier that the player shows up. But also you get the player showing up in reflections, although you don't have a head for some reason, which is a bit weird if you ask me. But that's how you can go about doing that. But there's also one last little thing that Supercan wanted to know, which is about how to make the player actually get affected by any projected texture entities. It seems to actually already be the case because, well, just look at what you're seeing on the screen right now. So that's actually kind of changed things a little bit for me. But say, for example, you wanted to keep this bottom shadow here, but make sure that the player model doesn't actually get drawn, then I know of a way that you can actually go about fixing that. So I'm just going to have to quit out the game and we come back here. And yeah, I actually didn't even set should receive projected textures to true. It's still false. And the shadow cast type is shadows none, and that works. But anyway, you could always just change this to true. That way the player should receive projected textures. Now, you can also change this shadows none to shadow render to texture dynamic, I believe it is. And then we can go back. That's in c_baseplayer.h at around line 206, as you see here. But then in c_baseplayer.cpp, we actually want to find the draw model function, like so. And the reason why the player model draws is because of this return base class : draw model of flags. So what we can do, especially as I said, if it's just the basic shadow that you want to display without actually causing the player model to be drawn, is we can add the following. So I just need to get my notepad up so I am doing this correctly. But we want to say if is local player, then we want to do if input arrow cam_is third person. Then what do we want to do? We want to return base class : of draw model passing through an input of flags. Else we want to return 0. So basically this check makes sure that we are the local player. Otherwise this might end up disabling our player model for like other spectators. That's just like a multiplayer consideration. So if this is pertaining to the local player, then if their camera is in third person mode, then draw the player model. Otherwise, we're in first person mode, don't draw the player model. So we can actually build the solution here. And I have a feeling this might take a lot longer than the original change that I just made, because it looks like it's rebuilding the entire client code, which is not good, or at least a good percentage of it. So I'll cut back to when I'm in game and I can show you this effect in action. Okay, everyone, so the code's compiled, and now I'm just going to go back into the map that I just used for testing purposes. And what you should see now is that the player's shadow, which would normally be cast in third person mode, is now getting cast in first person mode. Now, the downside is to doing this method is, well, if you go to the monitor, the player model doesn't show up. If you look in reflections, the player model doesn't show up. And if you go to something like a env projected texture entity, then the player is not going to get affected by it. And that's all because the game is not drawing the actual model for the player. But what we can do is enable server cheats, go into third person mode to enable the player model, and then you can see that all of the things that I showed earlier basically works still. So, the player shows up in reflections properly, and our head is visible even in third person mode, which is different than first person for some reason. But we also are able to be displayed in monitors and are affected by env projected texture entities like this. But if we go back to first person, then all of that goes away, and the only thing that stays is our shadow that is cast. And that's by tricking the game into drawing the model without actually drawing the model. But if you have any suggestions on how to basically get our player model to be displayed like this, but we get, we show up in reflections, monitors, and env projected texture shadows and stuff like that, then I'd actually greatly appreciate it. But that's what I was able to figure out, and hopefully that's good enough for you. And if it's not, then you can look into this on your own and figure something out, because this is as good as I'm going to do. But that's going to be the video for today, everyone. Hopefully you found it helpful. Let me know what you think. As always, have a great day. Peace out. Take care there. See you later. And I hope to see you for another video very soon. Have a good day, guys.